Hey everyone, welcome back to Old Master Channel. Today we're diving deep into the mesmerizing world of Felix Vallotton, one of the greatest masters of Expressionism. Over the next 17 minutes, we'll explore 5 of his iconic paintings, uncovering the secrets behind their creation. Felix Vallotton, The Bath Summer Evening. Imagine the quiet of a summer night, broken only by the sound of water lapping against skin. A woman, her body glowing pale against the darkening twilight, steps into a tub. This might seem like a simple, almost domestic moment. Yet in Vallotton's hands, it becomes something else entirely, charged, unsettling, hypnotic. The Bath Summer Evening, painted in 1892, was never meant to be just a scene of intimacy. It was Vallotton's declaration that art could disturb, even when showing the most ordinary of rituals. He was a man fascinated by contrasts, the innocence of a private bath colliding with the voyeuristic gaze of the viewer. Why does this painting feel so alive, so heavy with tension? Because Vallotton wanted it that way. He wanted you to feel like you were trespassing. At the time, Vallotton was part of the Nobbies, a circle of radical artists in Paris. While his peers embraced bright colors and flowing lines, Vallotton turned toward shadows, flat planes, and a kind of brutal honesty. He was already gaining a reputation as a master of woodcut prints, his stark black and white imagery shaking Paris with its sharp, merciless edge. But in painting he brought that same sense of confrontation. The creation of the Bath Summer Evening coincided with a turbulent period in Vallotton's life. He was restless, often described as emotionally distant, but deeply obsessed with uncovering the hidden psychological charge in everyday life. He painted this work in Paris, during an oppressive summer where the city's air hung heavy with both heat and political unease. France was entering the years of the Dreyfus Affair, social unrest and shifting cultural tides. And Vallotton, cynical, sharp-eyed, poured this tension into his canvas. Look closely at his technique. The woman's body is pale, almost marble-like, and stands out with eerie clarity against the muted tones of the room. The perspective is slightly skewed, flattening the space as if reality itself is warped by the atmosphere. Shadows press in from the corners, making the bather feel both private and exposed, a contradiction Vallotton delighted in. Symbolism runs deep here. The bathwater reflects no comfort, only a strange stillness. The viewer is positioned like a silent intruder, as though Vallotton is daring you to confront your own role as a voyeur. Is this about purity? Desire? Loneliness? Perhaps all at once. His work often suggests that beneath the surface of the mundane lies a darker truth, the hidden emotions, the secret lives people live behind closed doors. When first shown, critics didn't quite know what to make of it. Some praised the cold precision of his lines, calling him a painter of cruel intimacy. Others were unsettled by how his figures seemed less like individuals and more like symbols, caught in an atmosphere of unease. Unlike Renoir's sensual bathers or Monet's luminous gardens, Vallotton's art whispered of alienation. Over time, however, the painting grew in significance. Today, The Bath Summer Evening is regarded as one of his masterpieces of psychological realism. Proof that Vallotton could transform a simple act into something layered with tension, mystery, and emotional weight. And so the scene lingers, a woman in her bath, a summer night pressing in, and the viewer, you, left to wonder whether you've just witnessed serenity or intrusion. Vallotton leaves that haunting ambiguity for us to carry long after we look away. The Rape of Europa. At first glance you think you know this story. The Rape of Europa, the ancient myth retold for centuries by masters like Titian, Rubens, and Rembrandt. But when Felix Vallotton painted his version in 1908, he did something shocking. He stripped away the drama, the grandeur, and the passion, and replaced it with silence. An almost terrifying stillness. The myth itself is violent. Zeus, disguised as a bull, abducts the mortal woman Europa, carrying her across the sea. In most renditions, Europa struggles, waves crash, gods rage in the background. But Vallotton? He gives us something colder. The scene is almost too calm. Europa sits rigidly upon the bull, her body frozen, her face devoid of emotion. The sea is flat, endless, merciless. There is no divine explosion of power, only an eerie inevitability. Why would Vallotton do this? Why reduce a myth of gods and mortals to something so stripped, so suffocating? Perhaps because Vallotton saw myth not as spectacle, but as allegory. He lived in an age of disillusionment, industrial progress alongside social unrest, wars on the horizon, and the crumbling of old romantic ideals. In The Rape of Europa, Vallotton isn't painting mythology. He's painting the human condition. A woman, powerless, carried into the unknown by forces beyond her control. The creation of this work came at a point in Vallotton's life when he was increasingly focused on allegorical painting. He had married into wealth, his career was established, but emotionally he remained detached, often critical of human relationships. In Europa you can almost sense his cynicism. Love becomes abduction, fate becomes silence, and myth becomes a mirror of human helplessness. Look at his technique. Unlike the dramatic brushwork of the Impressionists or the lush sensuality of earlier masters, Vallotton's hand is cold and precise. The surface is smooth, controlled, the colors muted but unyielding. Europa's pale body glows against the dark bull, but instead of radiating sensuality, it feels corpse-like, drained of vitality. The horizon stretches endlessly without comfort or hope. It is a painting not of passion, but of inevitability. Symbolism lurks everywhere. The bull, symbol of power and desire, moves forward without resistance. Europa's passivity becomes the true horror of the scene. Is she resigned? Terrified? Or has Vallotton removed her agency altogether, turning her into nothing more than a figure carried by fate? Some critics have even argued that Vallotton was commenting on women's position in society, voiceless, objectified, trapped in structures beyond their control. When the painting was first exhibited, it unsettled viewers. Many expected grandeur, but instead they were faced with something stripped bare, clinical, almost cruel. Some called it lifeless, others called it brutally honest. Over time, however, it has been recognized as one of Vallotton's most chilling masterpieces, a reinvention of mythology that speaks more about modern existence than ancient gods. Think about it. In an age hurtling toward the First World War, where millions would soon be swept away by forces far beyond their control, Vallotton's Europa seems almost prophetic. The calm surface hides the terror underneath, much like the calm before a storm. And so, the painting lingers in your mind. Europa on the bull, her fate sealed, her expression unreadable, the sea stretching into infinity. No screams. No struggle. Just silence. That is Vallotton's genius, to take a myth of thunder and passion, and leave you with the quiet horror of inevitability. The 14th of July at Etretat. The date is July 14th, Bastille Day. Across France, the air is alive with firecrackers, flags, laughter, and celebration. But when Felix Vallotton arrived in the seaside town of Etretat to witness the festivities, what he saw was something entirely different. Not the joy, not the freedom, not the collective ecstasy of a nation reborn. Instead, Vallotton saw chaos, noise, and a crowd transformed into something almost menacing. And that is exactly what he painted in the 14th of July at Etretat. At first glance, it looks like a scene of simple festivity. Fireworks exploding in the night sky, waves of people gathered along the promenade, faces turned upward. But linger on it, and you begin to sense what Vallotton truly captured. The crowd is faceless, a mass of dark forms crammed together, their individuality lost. The fireworks, instead of joyous, look like strange bursts of violence, tearing across the sky. The colors are harsh, the atmosphere suffocating. It is not celebration. It is tension. Vallotton painted this in the 1890s, a time when he was increasingly fascinated by social scenes. But unlike the Impressionists who sought to capture fleeting beauty, Vallotton's gaze was colder, sharper. He didn't see light shimmering romantically on water. He saw the crowd as an organism, a beast that swallowed individuality. Etretat, known for its stunning cliffs and serene landscapes, became in his eyes a stage for human unrest disguised as festivity. Look closely at his technique. The brushwork is tight, controlled, almost unnatural. The fireworks explode in rigid, geometric bursts, less like flowers of light, more like cracks in the sky. The sea is dark, heavy, oppressive. The people are reduced to shapes, shadows packed tightly together. It is as though Vallotton stripped away the illusion of celebration, showing us its skeleton, noise, chaos, and the fragility of order. Historically, this is significant. France at the end of the 19th century was both proud of its revolution and deeply fractured by political unrest. Nationalism was growing, social tensions rising, and Vallotton, a Swiss-born outsider living in Paris, looked at France with both fascination and suspicion. The 14th of July at Etretat becomes not just a depiction of a holiday, but a commentary, that beneath the fireworks of unity, there lies a darker truth about the masses and the fragility of freedom. Symbolism is everywhere. The faceless crowd represents the surrender of individuality to the collective. The fireworks, so sharp and violent, resemble artillery blasts, prefiguring the violence that would erupt in Europe only decades later. Even the sea, usually painted by artists as a symbol of freedom, here feels heavy like a wall pressing in. When the painting was exhibited, it confused audiences. Many expected joy, impressionist light, the beauty of Etretat's cliffs. Instead, they were met with something darker, stranger, almost alienating. Critics accused Vallotton of being cynical, of lacking patriotism. But in time, the work came to be recognized as uniquely powerful. Not just a painting of a holiday but an X-ray of human society under pressure. And think of how haunting it is, a celebration stripped of its joy, turned into something uncanny. Fireworks no longer symbols of freedom, but warnings in the night sky. A crowd no longer a community but a shapeless force. Vallotton forces us to ask, in the heart of celebration, is there always the shadow of unrest? The painting leaves us with an uneasy question, echoing long after the fireworks fade. Was Vallotton merely recording what he saw that night in Etretat, or was he warning us of something far larger, that every celebration hides its opposite, every joy carries the seed of violence? Woman with Maid Bathing. At first glance, it seems intimate, almost tender, a woman and her maid in the simple act of bathing. Yet, in Vallotton's hands, intimacy is not soft or sentimental. It is unsettling, precise, and full of psychological tension. The viewer is caught between voyeurism and revelation, seeing a private moment rendered with almost surgical detachment. Vallotton painted this in the early 1900s, at a time when he was exploring domestic interiors and the subtleties of human behavior. Unlike Impressionists who celebrated leisure and light, Vallotton sought to expose the hidden dynamics of social class, power, and observation. The bath is no longer a sanctuary, it is a stage where roles and hierarchies are silently displayed. Look at the composition. The maid leans slightly forward, her body partially obscured, while the woman she serves appears rigid, almost tense. Vallotton's brushwork is deliberate, clean lines, flat planes of color, stark contrasts. The room itself is simplified, almost geometric, drawing attention to the figure's posture and interaction rather than the surroundings. Every shadow, every fold of cloth, every tilt of the head carries meaning. Psychologically, this painting is rich. Vallotton seems fascinated by the unspoken power structures between servant and mistress, intimacy and observation. The woman's gaze, or the lack of direct eye contact, suggests either indifference or introspection. The maid's posture, subdued but attentive, hints at the strict social rules governing even the most mundane interactions. Vallotton's emotional state during its creation was reportedly one of intense observation, almost clinical, as he sought to uncover the hidden truths behind everyday life. Symbolism is subtle but powerful. The bath, typically a symbol of cleansing and renewal, here becomes a metaphor for exposure and the scrutiny of societal roles. The woman's partially covered form reflects vulnerability, yet her composure indicates the enduring influence of status and decorum. The interplay of light and shadow reinforces the tension, casting the scene in a tone of quiet drama rather than softness. Historically, Vallotton was influenced by Japanese prints and post-impressionist composition, favoring flat planes of color and bold outlines. This influence is evident in the painting's precision and simplicity, yet it is imbued with his unique psychological depth. At a time when Parisian society was obsessed with appearances, Vallotton used domestic scenes to reveal the contradictions beneath the surface. The reception of Woman with Maid Bathing was mixed. Some praised its technical brilliance and insight into human behavior, while others were unsettled by its cold detachment. There is no glamour here, no romanticized vision of domestic life, only the unflinching observation of reality. Over time, it has been recognized as one of Vallotton's most revealing works, demonstrating his mastery of both form and psychological insight. Poetically, the painting lingers in the mind, a private moment stripped of sentimentality, transformed into a reflection on hierarchy, intimacy, and observation. You can almost hear the silence of the room, the soft splash of water, the unspoken tension hovering between the two figures. Vallotton turns the mundane into something quietly disturbing, yet undeniably compelling, leaving us to ponder the subtle power plays that govern human relationships. The light. Imagine a cold, shadowed room. Two figures lie sprawled on a bed, their faces hidden, their bodies twisted as if in a silent struggle. The air is thick with tension, secrecy, and something unspeakable. This is The Lie, painted by Felix Vallotton in 1898, a work that plunges the viewer into the dark corridors of human deceit and desire. The hook is immediate. Vallotton did not merely depict a domestic scene, he created a psychological thriller on canvas. The painting's title alone, The lie hints at betrayal, hidden truths, and moral ambiguity. Who lies? What is the truth? The answer is deliberately elusive, and that uncertainty seizes the viewer from the first glance. The creation of this work was marked by Vallotton's fascination with human psychology and moral complexity. At this point in his career, he was exploring the interplay between surface appearances and hidden realities. Vallotton's emotional state was intense and analytical. He sought to expose the unspoken tensions that define relationships, especially those marked by secrecy or betrayal. This painting is not sentimental. It is forensic in its precision. Observe the technique. Vallotton uses stark contrasts of light and shadow to isolate the figures from the surrounding room. The composition is compressed, almost claustrophobic, forcing the viewer's eye to focus on the tangled bodies and the tension between them. The colors are muted but deliberate, grays, deep ochres, and cold whites, emphasizing the gravity and darkness of the scene. Every brushstroke is purposeful, each contour revealing the weight of the lie being told, the secrecy being maintained. Historically, Vallotton was influenced by Symbolism and the Nobby's movement, which emphasized expressive color, flat planes, and allegorical meaning. Yet the lie transcends decorative trends. It is a profound exploration of moral and emotional conflict. Society at the time was obsessed with appearances and propriety, and Vallotton's painting strips away the facade, revealing the raw, often unsettling human reality beneath. Symbolically, the painting is dense. The bed becomes a stage for deceit. The intertwined forms suggest intimacy corrupted by dishonesty. Shadows dominate, hinting at the darkness that lies beneath human interaction. Light, limited and selective, does not illuminate. It interrogates, exposing only fragments and leaving the rest to uncertainty. Vallotton asks the viewer to confront the tension between what is seen and what is hidden, between trust and betrayal. The reception of the lie was polarized. Contemporary audiences were both fascinated and disturbed by its frank depiction of human duplicity. Unlike the Impressionist celebration of leisure or light, Vallotton's work was stark, confronting, and psychologically probing. Over time, however, critics recognized it as a masterpiece of narrative tension and emotional depth, demonstrating Vallotton's unparalleled ability to marry formal precision with profound psychological insight. Poetically, the painting leaves a lingering echo, the unspoken words, the hidden actions, the moral ambiguity that persists long after the viewer has stepped away. The lie does not resolve. It asks questions, challenges perceptions, and haunts the mind. In Vallotton's hands, deception is not a story told with drama. It is a state of being, a shadow over human relationships that is as universal as it is unsettling. That's a glimpse into the life and work of this amazing artist. If you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Tell us in the comments which painting moved you most. And remember, art is not just seen, it's felt.